Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on the collections module. In this lecture we look at the counter method. So the counter method keeps track of the number of times similar values are added. And we can initialize it by using a sequence of items or by using dictionary keys and passing the number of counts. Or we can even initialize it by mapping string names to the number of counts. Let's see an example. The first thing we need to do is import the collections module. So import collections, which is the module. Now that we have imported the collections module, we can use the counter method. So collections dot counter. Let's see some examples of how we can initialize this counter method. So we can pass a sequence of items. For instance, we can pass collections dot counter, and let's pass a list containing the items. Let's say x, y, x, x, y, z, y, and x. That's one way of initializing it. We see that x appears, the number of counts of x is 4 times, y appears 3 times in our list object, and z appears only once. So it keeps track of the number of times our elements are added. Another way of initializing it is by using a dictionary key and passing the number of counts. So collections dot counter, then we can pass so key, we can say x in our case, and then the number of counts. Let's say 5, we can say that. And then y colon, the number of counts we can pass, let's say 6. Z, the number of counts we can say 2, and any other character. V, let's say 3. So we can initialize the counter method like that. So we see here we have the number of counts for V, which is 3, X 5, and so on. Another way is by passing a string name and mapping the number of counts to the name. So we can say collections dot counter. Let's say we can say x is equal to 4, y is equal to 2, z is equal to 5, and v is equal to 3. Run it, and we have our counter for each of the elements. Another thing we can do is we can create a list object and save it in a variable, let's say list1. Then we can pass characters like a, b, c, x, y, z, so x, a, x, and b. Then we can say collections dot counter, and then simply pass our list1 object, and that will give us a count for each of the elements. Similarly, we can create a string and save it in a variable called string1, And let's create a bunch of random strings with characters. Okay, and we can say collections that counter and then pass our string1 object, and we'll get a count of each of our elements in our string. We can also create an empty counter. So we can simply say collections that counter and then run it. So this is an empty counter, and let's save this in a variable called x. Run it again. So if we call x, we see that we have an empty counter, and if we want to add elements to it, we can call the update method. Now that we have our empty counter object, we can add elements to it by using the update method. Let's see how it works. So we have our object x dot, there we call the update method, and then pass the elements that we want. For instance, we can say 1 2 3 3 2 2 3 4 1 1 2. So if we call our x now, we have 1 appearing 3 times. The number of counts for the element 2 is 4 times. 3 appears 3 times, and 4 appears once in our counter object x. We can again call the update method on our counter object and pass, let's say, 1 2 4. Now if we call x again, we have 1 appearing 4 times, 2 appearing 4 times, 2 appearing 5 times, and 4 appearing twice, right? Earlier it was only once, now twice. Similarly, we can say x dot update and then pass, let's say, we can use dictionary key and count method that we saw earlier. Let's say we can say 1 2 times, 2, let's say 3 times, and then 3, let's add 1 more element. Now if we call x, we have a new element 1 appearing 2 times, 2 appearing 3 times, 3 appearing once, and then our original elements. Similarly, if we want to change the values for our initial elements, we can say x.update and then use a dictionary. Let's say 1. Let's add 3 more elements. For 2, let's also add 3 more elements, and for our element 3, let's add 2 more elements. So if we call x again, you see here 1. Before it was, the count for our string 1 was 4. Now its count is 7, because we have added 3 more of our string 1. For 2, the count was 5 before, and then we added 3. Now it's 8. For our element 3, earlier it was 3. We added 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. Now we have 5. And so on. Great. In the next lecture, we'll continue with the counter method. Thank you, everyone.